Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever felt like the more research you do, the less you actually understand? Today, we're diving into a fascinating trap that catches pretty much all of us. It's this modern illusion of control. We walk around with this deeply ingrained belief that consuming more data, more news, and more analysis is just automatically going to yield better decisions. But what if all that extra input is actually blinding us? Well, this is the noise bottleneck. And by the end of our time together today, you might just completely rethink how you consume information.
So, are we drowning in data? Just think about your day-to-day life for a second. From the literal moment you wake up, your phone, your email, your social feeds, and now all these new generative AI tools, they are throwing a relentless tide of complexity right at your face. Honestly, it feels like you need to drink the ocean just to stay informed. But here is the secret we're going to unpack. You do not need a bigger cup. You need a better filter.
What exactly happens when that massive tide of data hits us? Information overload isn't just some trendy buzzword. It's a completely real, measurable psychological state. It happens when the input we're receiving simply exceeds our brain's physical capacity to process it. And the result? Our decision-making quality absolutely plummets, and our anxiety skyrockets. Our minds literally buckle when information is flowing faster than we can sort it out, and that forces us to rely on flawed, panicked shortcuts instead of deliberate thinking. Act 1. The context.
To really understand this crisis, we kind of need to look backward, because this actually isn't a new problem. Listen to this incredible, timeless piece of advice from Papa Q-Bear, speaking to his son, Papa, who is the author of the newsletter that inspired this explainer. He said, "Sonny boy, if you study something to death, it will paralyze you into inaction. Too much data floating in your head will just confuse you. See the base pattern, use your gut, and then execute." Long before we all had smartphones in our pockets, Papa Q-Bear was beautifully describing the exact mechanics of the noise bottleneck. When we overanalyze, we just confuse movement with progress.
You see, humanity has actually been complaining about data gluts since antiquity. Way back in the 3rd century BC, scholars were already warning people that an abundance of books was a distraction. Then in 1453, the Gutenberg press drops, and suddenly everyone is complaining about manuscript fatigue. Fast forward to the internet age, and now looking at 2026 and beyond, we are facing an absolute, unprecedented flood of AI-generated data. Here's the catch. The human brain hasn't upgraded its hardware since antiquity, but the timeline of information production has compressed into a crushing wave.
Act 2. The tension. And this brings us to the core conflict of our modern struggle. To survive this wave, we literally have to separate the signal from the noise. Think of the signal as the slow, meaningful, highly actionable patterns. It's the underlying truth. The noise, on the other hand, is the fast, random, totally distracting clutter. It's those moment-to-moment fluctuations that look incredibly important but actually mean nothing. The real trap here is that noise constantly disguises itself as signal, especially when it pops up as a red breaking news alert on your phone. To put that into perspective, consider this staggering mathematical insight from risk analyst Nassim Nicholas Taleb: 99.5%. He points out that if you're checking the news or the stock market or your analytics on an hourly basis, 99.5% of what you are looking at is completely meaningless noise. Just let that sink in for a second. We are burning our precious cognitive energy, reacting to almost entirely random fluctuations. But what happens if we just slow down? Taleb shows us that if you step back and observe that exact same data on a yearly frequency instead of hourly, the ratio magically transforms. It becomes a perfectly balanced 50% signal and 50% noise. By simply and drastically reducing the frequency of our consumption, we give that slow-moving signal the time it actually needs to emerge from all the static.
So you might be wondering, why can't we just absorb everything now and sort it out later? Well, cognitive science gives us a hard biological limit on that. Psychologist George A. Miller famously proposed that human working memory can only hold about 7 chunks of information at any given time. Our attention is a strictly scarce resource. You simply cannot keep up with infinite AI generation when your processing hardware has a strict built-in limit. When you try to force it, the system just crashes.
Act 3. The connection.
Okay, knowing the math is one thing, but actually feeling it in your daily life is another. Imagine you're walking through a dark, incredibly noisy forest, constantly checking your phone, refreshing your feeds, or running at another AI prompt. It feels really productive, right? It feels like you're mapping the forest, but this is the illusion of control. You aren't mapping the forest at all. You're just turning up the volume of the noise. Constantly seeking more information just crowds our limited memory and entirely blinds us to the real path forward.
Which creates this really dangerous inverse relationship. High-frequency checking leads directly to low clarity. Social media platforms and news sites are literally designed to exploit this. They reward constant checking with dopamine hits of outrage and endless interruptions. They reward frequency, not depth. As a result, your clarity drops while your stress levels rise. The alternative is simple, though definitely not easy, lowering the frequency of checking to yield significantly higher clarity. Nassim Taleb actually hit the nail on the head when describing what this environment does to our personalities. This constant stream of updates is transforming us into neurotic reactors. Instead of being equable, calm, even-tempered people who react only to real, actionable information, we become totally neurotic. We flinch at every single random data point, mistaking meaningless static for life-altering signal. The shrinking paradox. Which brings us to the grand conclusion and honestly the most vital lesson of this explainer. In today's world and with today's tools, especially AI tools, it is so easy to generate more data and create more analysis. But more is no longer the answer. To survive, we have to adopt two proven coping strategies. Step one is excluding. You have to aggressively and ruthlessly filter out irrelevant noise. Put up hard boundaries. Step two is including. Proactively seeking out only the information that truly matters to your goals. You literally have to become the strictest bouncer at the door of your own mind. So, it really all boils down to these three core takeaways. First, treat your attention as the most strictly limited resource you own, because it is. Second, be patient. Wait for slower, clearer patterns to form, rather than just reacting to hourly static. And third, stop checking unnecessary updates. Remember, more information only helps until it starts hiding the very pattern you were trying to see in the first place. Let's return to our Papa-inspired thought for a second. Sometimes it is absolutely better to heed the shrinking paradox and do less so you can actually do more. Stepping back from the noise bottleneck, refusing to overanalyze, and trusting yourself to see the base pattern is the only way to restore your ability to take meaningful action. Don't study the problem to death. Filter the noise, trust your gut, and execute. So I want to leave you with this lingering question to think about. Look at your phone today, look at your inbox, look at your daily habits. Are you consuming information to make your life better, or is that information consuming you? Take a step back from the noise today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Catch you next time.